Welcome, everyone, to Connected Learning TV. Thanks for joining us as part of a month-long partnership with EdTech Teacher on preparing for a year of mobile learning. I'm Carl Hooker, Director of Instructional Technology at Eanes ISD and also an EdTech Teacher Consultant, and I'll be your host for today. Throughout August, we are taking an in-depth look at how to prepare for a school year that, for many educators, will involve heavy mobile and tablet technology integration for the first time. Today, those of us in the Hangout will be providing some advice on preparing parents for mobile learning, but let's go over a few quick details before we dive in. So for those of you participating on live stream right now, we encourage you to use the chat there to introduce yourselves, connect with each other, and pose questions for those of us here in the Google Plus Hangout. And speaking of Google Plus, there's a fast-growing connected learning community with over 2,200 members. We'd love for you to be a part of the conversations happening there. The link to the G Plus community should be included in the live stream chat. To link for our public group notes Google Doc for today, that should also be in the live stream chat by now. We'd really appreciate your energy in capturing highlights and sharing resources related to today's conversation. That Google Doc will actually remain open to the public, so we can continue adding to it even after today. We're joined here today by a great group of people in the Hangout, and I want to give everyone a chance to briefly introduce themselves. So we're going to start off on the far right. And Scott, you want to go ahead and start us off? Tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do.
Thanks, Carl. It's going to be an exciting hour here. My name is Scott Meach, and I'm the Director of Technology in Downers Grove District 58. We're about 30 minutes west of the Chicago main city there, and we're kind of right in the heart of connectedness throughout the state and the suburbs.
Excellent. And then we have next to you, Patrick.
Thanks, Carl. My name is Patrick Larkin. As the screen says, I'm the Assistant Superintendent in Burlington, Mass. Previously, I was the high school principal where we launched a one-to-one iPad initiative. We're going into year 3 now, and in the district this year will be 4 through 12 with iPads, also first grade, and after next year we plan on being K through 12. So looking forward to the hour and learning along with everybody here.
Welcome, Patrick. And now we have Nat.
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Carl. To echo Patrick and Scott, I'm looking forward to this hour. I'm the principal at Blake Middle School in Medfield, Mass., which is about 45 minutes west of Boston. And we are entering the second year of working with mobile devices formally. Just finished a year of piloting with one cluster of 8th grade students having iPads throughout the whole year that were purchased by the district. And then this year we're launching and expanding into a Bring Your Own iPad initiative for the entire 8th grade. The high school is piloting the 9th grade a BYOD initiative with 1/3 of the kids having experienced iPads, and in 6th grade piloting the Nexus 7 tablets, because we're really trying to look from a district perspective the direction we want to look in a thoughtful way. So really excited. It's been a great, exciting learning experience, and I'm looking forward to this hour.
It seems like we all bring a lot of different expertise to the table here. You were mentioning BYOD, Nat, and I think one of the questions that I have, and I get a lot when I go out and we talk about this, bringing technology to schools, is how do we actually address kind of the issue of equity in that BYOD environment? So you mentioned that you guys have, you're kind of doing a little bit of both, where parents are buying a certain item and then bringing their own devices. How are you handling that? Or is everyone able to provide for their kids, or do you have kids that aren't able to bring in their own devices?
Yeah, and that's something that's really important to us, is the equity factor. And I think that is definitely one of the outweighing factors that we've experienced about one device versus BYOD. And I know at the middle school, we are providing financial support and need for any families that register the need for it. We have had a little bit, and it's been minor, but we've had definitely some feel if this is public school, and the district should be providing it for it. So this is where I think the essence of this hour is critical, because what really has come down to is a lot of communication with parents, and highlighting, inviting them into the classrooms, and really getting them to see authentically what's going on. And then that's been really important. And then at the high school, with the BYOD initiative, we've really tried to narrow it, so it's not just bringing any device, but it's definitely been much more of a Web 2.0 experience. And that's what they'll be looking at, versus sort of the iPad's really been much more about controlled apps and the creative aspect. So it's been different.
And I think that's a big part of that line that's being blurred, whether we insist that the parents bring in a device, but I've seen a lot of models that are really successful with BYOD where they do have that kind of menu of these are the choices that you have to bring in, rather than just an open kind of bring in anything. I should mention myself, just a little bit about my background. I kind of went through it quickly, but I am a Director of Instructional Technology for Ains. We have a one-to-one iPad initiative here. So K to 12, 8,400 total iPads, if that includes staff, and it's all paid for through bond dollars. So we've had a very supportive community that have purchased those iPads for us, and there is that expectation that we provide in certain ways, not only just the curriculum, but also kind of how are we going to change pedagogy around that. So Scott, I know you've kind of bridged a little bit from BYOD to a one-to-one. We started out with a kind of a little bit of a BYOD, but then went really full-fledged into one-to-one. So tell us, Scott, how did you kind of do that, bridge that gap from BYOD to one-to-one?
Well, there's a couple of things. We see the one-to-one pilot that we're moving towards this year. I didn't mention in my introduction that we have 1,400 K through 6 students going one-to-one for the 2013-2014 school year. Pending the success of that one-to-one program, which we anticipate, within 3 years then we will have all 5,000 students in our district as one-to-one. So as our preparation for one-to-one really began 2 years ago, it was more about laying the foundation for what we want to do with a one-to-one program. And within that, we opened up a BYOD pilot within one of our middle schools. And we really see that as a bridge to our one-to-one program. So in other words, teachers could kind of dip their toe in the water and kind of figure out what that's going to look like. Just, you know, some of the experimentation that goes with that. But at the end of the day, we see the one-to-one really being most productive from a district standpoint where we're providing those devices. We've set a standard, and at least it sets a foundation for everybody. Because ecosystem matters, and I'll probably talk more about that when we talk about our one-to-one. But at the end of the day, we're still trying to figure out where can BYOD fit within that, because we also are emphasizing really the personal nature of technology, and it's really intriguing. To me, the foundation of one-to-one and a BYOD is simple executive function skills, having kids calendar, having kids task reminders, and at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter what environment it is, because that's a foundation that all devices can have, if that makes sense. And so the trouble I have with the BYOD, if that's your main focus, is you do have an equity issue. So we see it as a bridge to our one-to-one, and then how it can enhance the personalization, but we still think one-to-one is a district initiative.
And Patrick, you guys experience a little bit of both of these, right? You've had one-to-one, you've had the BYO. What have been your experiences kind of going from one to the other?
Yeah, we don't stop people from bringing in other devices, but we are a one-to-one iPad school, so we don't really consider ourselves BYOD, but it's interesting because we consider ourselves a bridge school as well, because I think our ultimate goal is to get to the point where, as Scott alluded to, it doesn't matter what device they're using. They need to be able to use whatever device they have in front of them to do certain basic things. But honestly, and this is kind of what we're leading into with, you know, preparing the adults, particularly the parents for this. The adults in our school, the teachers, I don't mean this in a detrimental way. It's a big shift for them, for a lot of them. So we thought it was important, again, with that bridge to have one device that everybody was utilizing, because we thought going to BYOD right away, and some people have done it very well, but we thought going to BYOD would be a tough hurdle for us to clear right away. So for all the adults in our community, we thought one device was the way to go.
It's interesting, the differences I've seen with the parent response from a BYO to a one-to-one. With a one-to-one deployment, it's almost like the school district is putting this device in my kid's hands, and then they're bringing it to my house. I don't have that kind of control over it, whereas a BYO, it's flipped. The parent provides the device. They have control of it. Now it's the teacher's kind of concern to worry about the distraction about what each kid has got on their devices. So how do you guys address those kind of concerns about distraction, whether it be, you know, the teacher side of things, or when parents come to you and say, yeah, my kid's just off task at home, he's not getting any homework done, he's playing, you know, Candy Crush or Angry Birds all night. How do you guys address those things? Anyone want to take that to start?
I'd be happy to chime in.
Okay,
you know, again, I think at the root of it is a lot of communication. We've had a lot of concerns with middle school kids and parents saying, my kid's going to be distracted, going to be playing Angry Birds, going to be doing whatever it might be, really trying to give them concrete examples of classroom management and really helping teachers understand that it's a different way of looking at classroom management. In essence, no difference from doodling in a notebook. That, you know, in the notes I used to pass in school as well, and try and treat it in that manner. A lot of trust. Again, I think it helped a lot with parents, and we had a lot of forums throughout the year to have the kids be there and have the parents just talk to the kids that they know. That's their neighbor's kid, that they know these kids, and get a nice cross section of students too. Really important to hear from the kids and talk about, are they distracted, are they not? Get some formal and informal data.
Scott, what about you? Or Patrick, you have something? Go ahead.
No, sorry to jump in. I agree with Nat. It's the same thing that we tell our teachers. You can have a distraction with or without technology. Distractions aren't a new thing, in education for sure. But the communication aspect is so important. I think we've heightened the need for communication between home and school, because a lot of the kids will go home and say, I need my iPad to do my homework. And I think it's really important from the school standpoint, from teachers, to tell parents particularly what they're going to need to be doing online and what they don't. And as we tell the parents, we do own the devices, the public schools, but they own the kids. So we want to work with them. If they say, my child only gets 2 hours of screen time at home, then we want to make sure they know, yeah, they only need an hour for their schoolwork, and the other hour would be social. It's really interesting, because we've gone through this huge change where a few years ago we were telling parents, when your child has that family desktop computer, when they're on that, you should have that in a location in like a central area of the house where you can walk by and see what they're up to. And now the schools go and give the kids these tablets they can go in and pretty much go anywhere with and be online. So I think the rules should be the same. The student should always have that tablet out where the parent can see it. There should be no secrets to what's going on. And from the school standpoint, it's up to us to tell the parents what we expect them to be doing with that device. But if they're seeing things at home that are different, we want to have conversations, because we can help them set restrictions and guide them in those community conversations where our parents are learning from other parents about how they're managing at home have been very helpful.
I want to add in, I think it's really important. We've talked a lot with our parents that technology use in the classroom does not look like the workplace or what you see at home. Our one-to-one is not built on iPads. That just happens to be the device of choice right now. So our one-to-one is built on higher levels of integration of technology. Technology allows you to accelerate learning. And so in our district, Carl's going to start laughing here, we talk a lot about what's called the SAMR framework. And there it is. So what's important is that we are not using technology just for technology's sake. We are trying to augment, modify, and redefine learning. And so a lot of times when people start talking about studies regarding research for screen time, our response is that those studies are on a sit-and-get model. In other words, content is being delivered to students. And that is not what our one-to-one is built upon. Our one-to-one is about redefining learning, allowing kids to accelerate their learning so we can differentiate and focus on what individual kids need, a personalization. And it's all about creation. So kids that are using our device are creating content, they're using it for high level skills, and they're not just sitting watching video, they're not just sitting watching, basically consuming content. Now there is appropriate times for that to happen, and the devices can redefine learning in those experiences, but it's not just sitting and playing games. And to kind of summarize, technology in the classroom is very different from home and the workplace. I think a lot of one-to-one programs are built in the mentality of providing kids a mobile office where they can create docs and presentations. That isn't it. That's not enough. It's got to be built on an accelerated learning and the SAMR framework of augmenting, modifying, and redefining learning.
It's amazing because I kind of cheered jokingly with Scott when he mentioned SAMR, but we've experienced the same thing here. The higher we've gone up that scale to that transformative level of modification and redefinition, we've seen a lot more success and a lot less distraction. Almost like if you have a lot more kind of educational currency on one side, you're going to have a lot less of this need to distract because there's the tools being used for so much educational use that you don't run into the distractions much. But it's funny, none of this happens overnight. I think you guys can all agree that you'll have teachers, especially, I've run into this, and I famously kind of sent an email off and put it on Twitter about a teacher that came up to me and said, you know what I want, Carl? I want to be able to sit at my desk and I want to be able to see exactly what every single kid is doing on their screen at that moment. And he said, where's the app that lets me do that? And I told him, there's an app for that, and it's called the 2 Feet app. and it means you get up and you walk around the room and use your 2 Eyes app to actually see what the kids are doing and use iMouth to enforce restrictions. I mean, it's the kind of the oldest thing, you know, it goes back to just teaching in general. You guys have all mentioned communication. It's funny that, you know, that people that are kind of not in the tech world really focus on the technology, and all of us that are really involved in it, we focus on the communication, the relationship, the people part of it. So I don't, there's not really, they kind of want a quick fix right away, but I've seen less and less of that as we've gone higher up that scale that you mentioned, Scott. So I think that's good for those of you that are just starting out. Just be aware that happens. There's an implementation dip that Robert Marzano talks about, where, man, that first month, I don't know if you guys experienced this, but there was a lot of, you know, I'd walk into a classroom and I'd see a kid, you know, he'd take his iPad and hold it up, and you would see him playing a game in the back of the classroom because the teachers were still standing at the front delivering to the end. So, I mean, did you guys notice that? What were your experiences on those first kind of initial concerns? I think some of the folks listening today are just now starting to get into it. And while we talk about kind of where we're going to go and where we want to go, it'd be nice to kind of hear like the things we also had to encounter to get there.
Well, I think you said something that's very important, Carl, is it's trying to figure out how it fits in the process. And a lot of teachers start with that substitution lens, right? So in other words, you know, if they were a direct instruction teacher before, they're still in that model, and now how do I deliver content? So where they'll start is, how do I get a PDF to them so they can follow what I'm saying, my notes, or how do they get to the presentation I'm giving them? And that use is substitutional, and at the end of the day, it's not any more engaging than it was without the device. But
right.
Once you start creating your learning targets for your lesson to be focused on what students will do in that particular class, that dynamic changes things where kids won't be off task because they're now involved in learning. And that's above and beyond technology. It has nothing to do with the device itself. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And Nat, Patrick, anything to add to that about the distraction part of this and what you've seen early on, I guess, as you've gone into your BYODs or your one-to-ones?
Yeah, you know, I think some of the so when we did it last year, we piloted a team of teachers, and it was nice because we had a real cross-section of the teachers, so it gave a more authentic sense from one end of the spectrum, a teacher who was very facile with technology, loved it, knew what he was doing, to another teacher who literally was in tears meeting with us, saying she didn't know how to operate a flip phone.
Oh, no.
But she had the right attitude. I mean, she was scared, but just dove right in and really experimented with it. And I think that, you know, sage on the stage, the teacher at the front of the classroom, it liberated her to know with the device she can walk around the classroom more than she could before and do better classroom management and really tap in and help kids individually, and then using different apps, project the work onto the screen and really keep kids more accountable and have a much better sense of feedback. And I think that resonated, again, showing with parents and giving them simulation. We had parents come in and sit in the classroom and have them log in with their child next to them at night with the iPad, and then say, all right, you know, Johnny, have your mom project to the screen right away. And they could see, wow, that's accountability. And to tap in and keep them on task. And accountability in a good way. You know, and I think also really acknowledging with parents the distraction factor of, you know, they're worried about accessing inappropriate sites along those lines. You know, it's important for us, and I feel this very strongly about middle school. That's a good age for them to learn this. Well, what better age to learn it when to experiment and to give them authentic experiences where we can really guide them and really teach them the idea of citizenry, not just digital citizenry, but what does it really mean?
Well, and what's interesting is when technology is first substituted into a classroom, a lot of times the technology becomes the learning target. So you'll hear a lot of teachers saying, you know what, I want to do an iMovie project, or I want the kids to do a garage band project. And that means the technology becomes a learning target. When you go one-to-one and it becomes really effective, the learning target is clear and there's more choice, and that's how it becomes effective. So in other words, the example I put in the chat room that I've used a lot with conversations is, let's say a learning target is define utopian society and demonstrate your learning or your knowledge. That would be a learning target. Now the student can choose a keynote, they can choose Educreations, explain everything, they can do GarageBand, they can make an iMovie. It doesn't matter how they want to demonstrate that learning. It goes back to, do they know what a utopian society is, and did they demonstrate it? That's where one-to-one allows you. It's that personalization, the differentiation that will end up taking you further.
What do you guys find in terms of, like, how long does that take? I mean, Patrick, I'm going to have you jump in here too, in terms of, like, do teachers pick it up right away? Or are you noticing it's different for every teacher, obviously, but do some grab it and just run with it, and others you see they're still just substituting 2-3 years down the road?
Yeah, I think, again, one of the higher level things we're trying to do is create connections, beyond our classrooms. And for that to happen, we need to start doing it within our school building. So it's just, again, basic sharing of best practice and seeing the possibilities of what your colleagues are doing. So we've had a lot of informal time for teachers to get together departmentally and interdepartmentally just to talk about what some of the things they've been doing now that they have these resources, to Scott's point, and how some of these open-ended projects where they gave the students a lot of flexibility on how they prove their learning, and other teachers having those aha moments. And don't underestimate that, because again, we've all been a lot of us have been in the same school, in the same classroom even, for quite some time, so it's hard for us to think outside that box. So ultimately, and we've had some success getting teachers online and connecting virtually with teachers all over the world to share best practice, because that even raises the bar. But I think it's really important that we allow those opportunities face-to-face within our buildings first, so teachers start to, talk amongst themselves.
We've just now started kind of diving into that idea of PLC time, and I think, Nat, you've done some work with that in terms of common planning time. What are some successes you've noticed just from giving them teachers that time to really collaborate?
Yeah, I mean, it's so important, and I think, the middle school model, when you're able to pull it off financially, is very conducive to it, because you have built-in clustering teams, interdisciplinary, with the same group of kids, so you can really experiment with that. And that's one of the reasons why we were able to use the middle school as the pilot, because we were able to test a lot off of the same cohort of kids. But we have common planning time every day for our staff, and really we dedicate one of those meetings perfectly into working with our technology integration specialists that were dedicated. And it was a planning time that I knew I could attend as well. So once a week we had built in, and it was really important. Early on, it was a lot of tech stuff, kind of learning how to do things, but then it became much broader discussions. And I think that also, bridging into the discussion with parents, had them really help to understand the idea of common planning. And that it's, again, to Scott's point and Patrick's point, it's not about the technology. It was really headier discussions about how are the kids tapping into learning? Are we getting a better understanding of what different students and the individualization that they would appreciate? Wow, this app or this tool really tapped into so-and-so's work style. Could that transfer to English? Could that transfer to social studies? Could it transfer to world language? Again, parents can wrap their head around it. They needed the tangible examples. And really, the other thing that we did was also heighten examples through our mobile learning blog that we created, and continued to tweet it out, send it out, emails to parents where, again, they would kind of joke, well, here comes another message, but again, the more the better,
And that's what I was about to ask, that is, what ways do you guys, what tools do you specifically use that people that are listening may know, like, that is bringing parents in? Nat, you mentioned the blog. You also mentioned having parents sit in the actual classrooms. So I'll throw this out to the group. What are some things you've used, kind of tools in your tool belt to really bring parents in and have them experience what kids are experiencing in the classroom?
Well, I think it's important. I want to, before I totally answer that, Carl, I think the approach has to be on all of this. You have to create a culture within your district that is prepared for it. So it's not going to be anything in isolation. It's how you gather your entire message and put it together. So in other words, it's not like in committee work you have to do this, and in parent sessions you have to do it. You have to actually create a district culture, and that it's a big piece, right? So that's why we've actually taken SAMR and we've actually created it as a culture within our district. We have icons flowing all over the place. Our district institutes, we use that language within our committees. We've have embedded that conversation into our tools, we have a district web app that teachers can access, and the icons that are on the district web app are related to it. So it's about really creating a culture, and that culture has to be embedded in empowering teachers as professionals and decision makers. So I think there are so many great teachers out there that have, built their careers in situations where we talk about it. It's almost like they have the Betty Crocker approach. Like, give me a great recipe and I will make the best cake ever, and it will be good every year. But we have teachers who are even better than that, that can take that and personalize their learning, and we have to empower them to do that. And when you build a culture that's based on empowerment and excitement and redefining learning, I think that people will begin to see, kind of some real value. And to be more specific with your question, Carl, we use all the different social networking tools. So we've got district Twitter accounts and Facebook accounts. We have a parent tech support portal. So under our technology section, we have a help desk there, so parents can actually submit an actual help desk ticket. We set up a Google Voice number that they can actually call, and there will be a live person that can answer it from 7 to 4:30. And that we have sessions that we've partnered up with our public library in the community. So there's 5 sessions that they can go to and hear the message, get some support. So there's lots of little pieces, but really it goes back to my first point, and I'm belaboring it, sorry, is it's about creating a culture.
Yeah, I mean, that's a big point. You talk about a culture, it's not just the school, you're really talking about the community as a whole. And really, I guess if all the staff is on board and if the language is the same and everyone's kind of lockstep and they're all saying the same thing, it doesn't matter as a parent who I go to, principal, teacher, administrator, they're all going to say the same thing. It's SAMR, it's the model that we're all using. So I like that. Patrick, what about you? And, oh, I guess Scott, you're going to say something else and then we'll go to Patrick.
Yeah, and I don't want to also give the message that it is just totally lockstep, because really what I think it's mostly is allowing for people to ask really good questions. Instead of just kind of, taking it for granted and saying, oh, great, we've got, iPads for students. We've now created a culture where we ask really good, important questions, and that is, how are you augmenting your lessons? How are you modifying education, et cetera?
And Patrick, what about you? How's it going in Burlington?
Yeah, it's similar to what Scott has said, and I love his idea about the Google Voice number. I think one of the most important things when you initially get into this is to make sure people have access to have their questions answered or concerns addressed immediately. The biggest thing that's a frustration for parents and for teachers if something goes wrong and they can't connect with somebody. So like Scott, we've set up some resources, the primary one being our student help desk, where people can go pretty much anytime school's in session, and there's places where they can post questions and concerns when school's not in session. But the other point that's really important here is politically, these are big changes for communities to be making these types of purchases. In every community, you're going to run into people that are naysayers. Why do they need to do this? This is a waste of money. So also establishing the culture at the same time, you're transparent about all the positive things that are happening. You're showing people that their students and your teachers are using social media as learning media, not for all these inane things that we see on the nightly news for politicians making mistakes with what they're tweeting and so forth. We've all heard stories about athletes and all that. So we're showing firsthand that this stuff is being used constructively for learning. It's enriching our teachers and our students' experience. We're doing things that we couldn't have done otherwise, and it's important that we show our own story publicly, because if not, there's going to be side talk, or other people are going to go out and be talking without enough information. So when you create that culture, both in your school and online, I think people stop questioning and gossiping about things that just aren't true. So that's really important. And the other thing that I love about Scott's philosophy and the vision of his district is our job as educational leaders is to put more resources on the table for those great teachers that we have, and to trust them and get the heck out of the way. And it sounds like that's what he's doing there. They're not afraid to make a mistake, but they're trying new things to give their kids authentic experiences other people don't have access to. So I think that's a really important part here, to encourage that behavior for all learners, teachers and students.
Yeah, you made me think of talking about that openness and communication. One thing we've done is that we've had a digital parent learning series where we've actually held nightly, and I saw someone talking about it in the live stream too, about having kind of open houses of sorts, kind of like Nat was talking about, bringing the parents in. We'll have these discussions. The one we did at the high school the first year, I looked over at the assistant principal and I said, how many people do you usually have show up at these things? He said, there won't be more than 10 people here. And with about 15 minutes before it started, we had over 100. So I knew that it's a hot button topic, and they were very interested. And I think, and Patrick, you mentioned kind of being transparent about the picture. I think it's good to tell them the good things, but also you need to be kind of aware to say it's not always, I'm not looking through rose-colored glasses. Like, here are some problems that we've had and how we've overcome them. because I think parents know that's a lot more authentic when you say, yeah, we didn't do this perfect, but here's where we messed up and here's how we fixed it. At the end of that first parent night, I was surrounded by about 12 parents, and they were all kind of yelling at me from different angles. And my superintendent kind of smiled and walked off, which was very nice. But I thought, I started smiling, and one of the parents was really angry. She said, why are you smiling? We're mad about the fact that our kids are, trying to figure out all this technology and the way to be digital citizens. And I said, these are 8th grade parents. I said, you're figuring it out now. You're actually learning about it now rather than when they go off to college and you have no say over it. So, I mean, we're having the discussion now, and as much as it's an uncomfortable discussion, it's good that we're actually having it. So it sounds like you guys have really opened that up in a lot of ways. The one question I was going to ask Scott and then kind of the group is, you mentioned social media. When you guys use it as a district, and we're very guilty of not doing this, we don't use it socially. It's more of a blast. So we do tweets and Facebook posts as like, here's what's happening, but there's no interaction, so it's not really social. I was curious if any of you guys use it in a social way where you actually interact with parents via district Twitter or district Facebook page.
Well, to be very clear, my answer is we don't have a lot of interaction on that. The encouragement is come to board meetings, come to the parent meetings at the public library, come to talk with your building principals. So that social piece is we want that face-to-face. So it is more of a blast. The other thing I want to add on to what you were talking about, Carl, right before that is we use this word a lot this year already. We're on a journey and not a sprint. So the idea is that we want to reach those higher levels of learning, and it's not going to be instantaneous because people start with the lens of substitution. And that's great. That's why, one of the things I'll share out later on is we redigitized the SAMR framework so that the 2 bottom layers in this framework are substitution and augmentation, and they're purposely colored with cement because that's your foundation. That's where everybody starts. Nice. But reaching for the gold is where you modify and redefine learning. And that's why in that image they are the gold. So it's a journey. It's definitely not going to transform classrooms immediately, but it's that process that's building. We have lighthouse teachers who are already redefining, and we're trying to share those examples. And then those teachers that are really dipping their toe, they're starting with substitution and they're growing quickly. It's so amazing. And what's so important is, as important as the device is, and Carl knows I talk a lot about why I think the iPad is the ideal device for one-to-one at this point, it still doesn't matter at the end of the day. What is the focus of your one-to-one is what's most important. So I'm sorry to go on that tangent. Let me go back to your question. We just blast out information.
And it's a way to set up that face-to-face conversation. And in a lot of ways, that's probably good too. You'll end up, as you guys know, adults can sometimes be worse than kids when it comes to anonymous posting on blogs and things like that. So it's best always to have those conversations in public, I think, and kind of in an open forum. Do either of you, Patrick or Nat, do you guys use the district social media to communicate with parents, or is it more just a blast as well? I'm just curious.
We go back and forth a little bit. It depends what the topic is. The superintendent and myself both have had, back and forth with parents in blogs in the comment section. Really constructive. Nothing really ugly has been posted at this point. The Facebook page, there's not a lot of interaction other than likes, but it's there if people want to use it. And the primary Twitter interactions are going back to the high school, not as much as assistant superintendent. We're between myself and students talking about different topics. The school committee was even open one night. This was a couple of years ago to having a back channel Twitter conversation during a school committee meeting. So I think everybody has to do what's right for their school community. But one of the things we feel is that given the nature of the family life nowadays in this 21st century, we love people to come to the school, but if they won't come or if they can't come because they're so extended with kids' activities and work or whatever, we have opportunities to engage them in a two-way conversation using some of our online resources. But I'll tell you right now, I've been in other communities where I've seen the newspapers have comment sections that just have ugly conversations back and forth. And I don't know if I would do it if I were in one of those communities, but I'm very fortunate in my community that the conversations people have are 99.9% constructive and respectful. So I think one thing to be aware of is if you're using social media, it's going to amplify whatever the culture is in your school community. And so if there's people that like to, make disrespectful remarks anonymously or with their name on them, you may want to go a little bit slower. But I'm fortunate to be in a place where that's not the case right now.
And I think, we touched on the fact that we want parents communicating with us, but I think one thing, and this is actually posted in the live stream, we kind of think that technology is a kind of universal language in some ways, but how do you guys address like the concern about a linguistic or technical divide of sorts? And I didn't ask this before, but kind of what the makeup of your districts are in terms of demographics. But I'm curious if you have a lot of English language learners that there's other ways to communicate with them. In our case, of course, when we send out information, we send out both in English and Spanish. But when it comes to a lot of things we've been talking about, it's even if it's a live stream that they're watching a board meeting of, it's primarily or always going to be in English. So do any of you have any tips or advice for those in the audience about how to handle that kind of linguistic divide or even a technical divide that we still see out there?
Yeah, I'm happy to chime in a bit. But I will say so Medfield's a very homogeneous population, so we don't have a lot of English language learners. But I think the question's a good one because it leads to the whole essence. I think Scott and Patrick have spoken, and you as well, Carl, eloquently about that. Again, it's not about the technology. So you got to recognize what the culture is in your protocol in the district, regardless of whether you're talking about technology or not. What was the communication tool that you would do if you were talking about an issue or a student safety concern? How would that be communicated? What's the best way of meeting the culture of the district and recognizing that? So I think that's important. So with the technology divide more so than the language divide, we've had to really recognize how is it that those families want the communication, how do we outreach, what's our channels for doing that, and really making sure that we provide those opportunities for them. So if it is translators, we make sure they're there as well. If there's a challenge about parents attending open house at night, well, we'll do one in the morning as well. We'll do it before school. If we need to figure it out and do it, early on, I was doing some Saturday morning session because I recognize that some of our families, not everyone has the availability at night during the week or during the school day. So I think you have to be flexible. It's a lot of time, but that investment's important. I mean, Patrick, speaking to the culture is very important. You have to recognize, are they ready for that communication? If not, go slowly, but kind of push yourself a little bit.
Yeah, Patrick, Scott, anything to add there?
Well, we have a fairly diverse community. It's very middle class. We have 13 buildings, 2 middle schools, and 11 K through 6 elementary buildings, and it's very diverse within that. So some buildings are in areas that have more financial challenges than others. So we have a range for sure, and that goes back to that original question that you were talking about with the BYOD. We do see this as a way to level that conversation, right? So to me, it's about empowering students, and it's an exciting journey and I keep using that same word, right, Carl? So I don't know how much more I can add to that, but I think that's where we're at.
And I think in Eanes, our school district's very high socioeconomic, very kind of homogeneous, like you said, Nat, in terms of it's very much a similar population. Interestingly enough, our second most dominant language is Urdu. So we're not used to kind of having those discussions in terms of like how are we going to get to those other parents. However, before I came to Eanes, I worked in East Austin where we were about 98% low socioeconomic, and then the primary language was Spanish. One of the things that we did was we actually brought parents in. I had after-school classes with parents and just taught them how to actually use the computer, and it was pretty powerful stuff because to them, I mean, it wasn't high enough in their kind of priority to have technology in their buildings or in their houses. That is, they felt it was more important for them to have other things, whether it be a nice stereo or a nice television, but having internet and having a really nice powerful computer was very low on their list. So kind of showing parents what the importance of that was pretty powerful, and it was really cute because a lot of them they couldn't afford to. They were very supportive, and they asked me to come to their houses, which I did, and they would pay me in tamales, which I love, which actually I ended up eating way too many of, which now I have diet issues, but that's a whole nother subject. But it was a great way to connect with those parents, and then I kind of let an open platform for them to come in and ask me questions. So it was interesting because I didn't know a lot of Spanish, but I learned Spanish from them, and they learned technology kind of from me. But it still goes back to kind of what we started at the very beginning of this with, which is making those connections and having that relationship with them. So I think that's what it all kind of comes back to. I'm going to kind of change course a little bit here and pivot. Let's kind of go back a ways to the distraction issue and focus solely on the home. Have you had parents ask you for like advice, tips when it comes to, you know, what kind of filter should I buy, or how should I, and I think Scott mentioned this a little bit, like, you know, just kind of being a parent is part of it, but what are some tricks and tips that you guys have kind of picked up along the way that you'd like to pass along to our audience? But also just, I'm curious to see, is there things that you guys have talked to parents about to kind of help their homes become a little more digitally aware for their students and for their kids?
I know one of the things we got a lot of feedback through our surveys. You know, we did a lot of Google form surveys of parents, and then towards the end, all right, what do you think parents need? And really, it was a lot of resources. So we're planning on doing more, as you had mentioned, tech workshops for parents. I mean, really teaching them how to use the devices. That's been a lot of the feedback, is saying, this is great, but I have no idea how to even help my child, or you go out how to turn on the device. I've never even seen it, but my kid's doing all these things. And so really doing some workshops for them has been important. On our mobile learning blog, which I'll be happy to send out, you know, I think we have a section for parent support, and part of that is giving service providers, if you have Verizon, if you have AT&T, if you have Sprint, these are the numbers you should call. Our director of technology has done a lot of outreach, saying, hey, if you want to come on in and meet with me, I'm happy to help you. I'm happy to, you know, give me a ring. Here's my number. And the more resources, I think it's an opportunity. Scott, I love the idea of the journey, because that's really what it is, and that we're in it together. I think, again, getting that transparency is so important with parents, sharing the failures that we've had, the frustrations we've had. It resonates with them to hear our challenges as parents ourselves, because a lot of our staff have children, and they're going through this too. And that speaks their language. Again, getting at the culture, but it's a journey.
Can Patrick, you want to add something?
Yeah, I was just going to say that one of the things we did, again, to try to deal with that a little bit, was we put on a third-party app called Lightspeed application, which allows the stuff to be filtered whether they're in school or out of school. So that, again, it's not the default browser, and it's not perfect, and the kids hate it, but we weren't comfortable giving them a school device, knowing they were going to take it home, and knowing that parents weren't really quite ready for having their kids with this device and not having a little bit of filtering. At the same time, some of our parent forums, we've learned from the parents, they've learned from each other. In one, again, little story was this parent talking about how he had set up a restriction. He knew how to set up restrictions on the iPad, which is something we've helped parents do. Like I said, we can be more restrictive if they want us to. He had set up a restriction blocking the App Store, because he didn't want the student buying any apps without him knowing about it. And when the child went home, he said, you know, my teachers ask me sometimes to load apps for class, and I can't do it because you've restricted me. So the dad, again, being savvy, did a little research, and he said what he did then was he set a restriction, which is another possibility, for the child, so he can't delete apps. So that the child could buy an app, but then at the end of the day when he got home, the dad was going to be able to see it. And he would have to explain why he had it and what he was doing with it. And other parents learned from his story. So again, bringing people together really allows, you know, people to share how they do things at home to help their kids deal with this. And again, the filtering thing that Nat does, we may not have been as proactive as he has, and that's something we have to work on, is really helping them set up their home networks, and because we want to get away from using a third-party app at this point.
Yeah, go ahead, Scott.
I was going to mention, Carl, that for our one-to-one, we are in a K-8 environment, and we also do have a filter. So when the students are at home, their devices are filtered. We use Lightspeed. And for me, the most important thing about a filter is that accidental search, right? So Patrick talked very well about how families need to have conversations about bringing where the device can be accessed, you know, those conversations about what time is appropriate to be using technology. Those are family conversations that we're encouraging parents, and that'll be talked about at our launch events. All of our parents have to attend one of the launch events before a device can go home. But within that, we're going to talk about this filter that's going to be on there. But no filter is foolproof. But to me, it prevents that accidental, right? So a kid types in something anonymous and it's just inappropriate what comes up, right? That's why it's important to do that. That story of how the teenage student in Australia and how he broke the countrywide filter is just such a powerful story that I think people should Google. At the end of the day, if a student is going to try and do something that's nefarious with an iPad, my assumption is they're going to find out how to do it, and that's just something that's a behavior issue, and we have to address that as a behavior issue and not a technology issue. And so I think the most important thing about how we're supporting parents, especially with the concept of filtering, et cetera, is come to those public library events, come to our parent launch events, use our help desk, and you know, talking about the purpose of one-to-one. So, you know, if a kid is sitting on Angry Birds for a couple hours, that is a behavior conversation, not an iPad conversation.
I think that filter is a good point when you talk about, you know, it's almost like if you go to someone's house and they have the locks on the doors, they lock the door. If someone wants to get into your house, they can break into your house still, but they're really going to have to make an effort to do that. I think I talk to parents all the time. You could build this 20-foot wall, but know that kids, if they want to, they'll build a 21-foot ladder to get over that wall. So I think being aware of that and setting up those kind of ground rules in the house is a big part of it. Nat, did you have some that you wanted to share? There were some good rules that you kind of picked up along the way?
Yeah, and that's something, you know, I think, Patrick, you talked about the kids not being thrilled about some of the things we're doing, but at the sessions where we have both parents and kids there, is again being transparent and talking directly to both as equals, so they hear it and then they can say, well, you remember Mr. Vaughn talked about this, and the school's talking about this as well. And I use that term a lot with kids about house rules and talking to kids about, you know, your best friend may have different rules, but it's house rules. Mommy and daddy, or mom and mom, or dad and dad, or whoever it is, or grandparents, they're the ones in charge. And we have to respect that. And I think, you know, Patrick, or Scott, you made a point earlier about really hearing that, and when parents have their concerns, engaging in that conversation and welcoming it, because it helps us to better understand how to approach it. One of the best pieces of advice that I stole from someone else a year ago was the advice of sharing with parents that all devices should be charged on the bedside table at night of the parents. And I thought it was great because it addresses that issue we all have concerned about having to unplug, that we need to, and I need to do it better myself. And then the charge device, it took care of that, but the kid's expectation is to bring in the device charged every day. And I think that was important to talk about. Kids were not thrilled about it, but it does address that issue. And I think to that point too is, it sort of spoke to that we've talked about, you know, trying to have some non-technology expectations as well. That's really important. Balance is critical, and to say, you know what, this weekend, besides a non-homework weekend, we're doing a non-device weekend this weekend too. And we encourage parents, you know, don't tap into your phone. Don't tap into email. You know, wait until Monday morning to send that email to the teacher or whoever. Because I think that's important, equally important for parents to hear that we understand that, and that we're struggling with it ourselves.
Modeling, good point.
Have any of you actually worked with somebody where you built the volcano model where it actually bubbles over, right? Do you want your students on the weekend staying up till 3 in the morning working on building a lava, you know, fountain? No, I mean, so it comes back to, you know, at the end of the day, you know, whatever the homework is or whatever activities are going on at home, we as families need to decide what's best for our kids, right? I certainly don't want my kids doing homework for 4 hours with a textbook.
Right.
You know, it's the same kind of concept. If they're taking 4 hours on their homework, I think there's a conversation needs to be had about that versus, you know, how much time they're on the technology.
Yeah, I just want to mention one quick thing. My kids go to schools where they don't have access to these devices. But they all have smartphones, and they're all doing all kinds of things, and the parents are, I think, a little less on top of things than people are in our districts. So I just want to say, no matter where we're at as schools that are starting in this one-to-one journey, I think we're way ahead of communities where they're not accepting these or they're not able to get them in the schools because we're having these conversations with our parents and our families that they're not having. I got a call from a school down the Cape, a middle school, where they were concerned about what kids were doing on Instagram, and the parents had no clue. It's not a school where they have devices. So I think, again, we'll hear all kinds of things, and when people start talking about filtering, I'm not trying to be a wise guy, but say, especially at the high school, how many of your kids have smartphones, and see who put their and how do you filter those? They don't. So I mean, it's important we have these conversations. We're doing our kids, our parents, and our communities a huge favor by what we're doing.
You're exactly right. How many of them have provided them Xbox and are now having all these kids playing games with others across the world? I mean, what's interesting is I don't think people really understand how many devices they've provided their children that are connecting. And so we have actually provided them the safest tool for that connection. You know, we do provide student email for our students, but at this current time, the way we've got it set up is it's locked between the teacher and the student domain. It also is filtered, and that filter is hilarious because it's got the biggest list of inappropriate words I've ever seen in my entire life. Whoever is creating that list, yeah, absolutely, it's crazy. And you know, it's even got like, you know, inappropriate words broken with spaces and stars between them. So it gets filtered from that. It even filters images. You know, and yet when you do a survey with students, many of them have worked with their parents where they've created a free email on their own that isn't filtered. So I feel really good about where we're at because we're actually providing them the most secure platform to be doing their work with. But also, it's not the Wild West, right? And we're now in a productive conversation. So when things do happen, it's that just-in-time learning, right? We're able to have an appropriately good conversation versus what was happening before our one-to-one.
Yeah, all this discussion has brought about a lot of ideas kind of in my head too. One, when you were talking, Scott, about, you know, parents don't know what they have connected. It'd be really curious if we could develop something that was like a digital home audit of sorts. So like say, these are the devices that are connecting to my internet. These are the accounts that my child has, almost like a checklist for parents. I think that'd be a powerful thing to kind of give parents out there in the community, something they could take away with and say, okay, here's my list. I'll just share a few stories real quick, and then we're going to get to our last couple of questions. One that another parent shared with us was she has a limitation. You know, there's times for play and there's times for work, and these devices, we try to insist that it's all educational, but we know that the reality is there needs to be time for them to kind of downtime too. So she's actually told me that she restricts a maximum of 3 apps at a time that are entertaining in value at all. So if a kid wants a 4th app that's a game app, she has to delete, or he has to delete one of those other apps. Kind of keeps them limited in range, which I thought was good. Another one that I've seen on the internet, and it went viral I think about a year or two ago, was the parent who put the Post-it note on the refrigerator that said, you know, you want access to the internet, here are the 3 chores that you have to do before I give you the Wi-Fi password. You know, walk the dog, take out the trash. And I told that to some parents. You could see them just kind of rubbing their hands. They're thinking, oh, that's an excellent idea. Because really, it's the internet is what the kids want access to. So we've kind of made it a point here to say that there needs to be the availability of doing the work offline as well. So if they don't have internet access at home, we didn't really hit that very much, but if they don't have that access, is there an alternate way of which they can do the work offline as well? So just those kind of quick stories to share. Nat, did you have one more thing you wanted to add to that conversation about parents helping?
I think the engaging in parents is real quick. Some of the issues that we were made to light came directly from parents. I mean, they made us aware of some of the concerns that they heard kids were doing, whether it was through Instagram or Snapchat or whatever it might be. And they were the ones that called us. So again, that gets to the culture of openness and being able to welcome parents bringing up concerns and that open door of, hey, let us know, because we don't know everything. If you're talking on the soccer fields, we don't know that. Let us know, and we may need to be aware. We may be as ignorant as you. And it was wonderful because then I was able to right away tweet out and send an email blast to all parents saying, going into this week, and I need you all to look at your child's picture rolls. I need you to look at this, look at that. And it was great. And I think we've shared that with parents, you know, building it, like, how do we build the culture of positive support of tech integration? Having parents hear and then hear that, wow, so if I have a concern, I can bring it forward, and that's okay. And it absolutely is. And then when we've had transgressions, engaging the parents in to come in to look at the device with the parent and to really help, like, engage them in that discipline process and figuring out, to Scott's point, was this a genuine mistake? We've had a couple that were absolutely genuine mistakes, and what better time to make the mistake than in middle school before you start to get to high stakes, and that culture of failure and mistakes, and that's okay.
And that's where it goes back to, Nat, is that conversation, it takes a culture. It doesn't take pieces. And once you build that where it's open and transparent and empowering and built on creativity. So when you talked about the importance of, you know, the network connection at home, that's why, you know, Patrick, I would love to hear more, you know, off the show here. The iPad has provided a platform where it's not completely embedded with being online. Get those digital materials on the device. They don't always have to be connected because there's some amazing resources you don't need to be connected. You know, can I throw out a plug for Patrick? if people haven't seen it, people need to go to the Apple's education resource and see all about what Patrick's district has got. It's such a beautiful like expose of what you guys have done.
That's a great video. I saw that recently.
I'd also echo, I mean, Patrick, the willingness at Burlington to also open up to other schools to learn too. I mean, to see it as a teaching school and teaching culture, and I think that's important. Parents like that idea as well, to know that, you know, we are working with other school systems and that we're learning from them as well and really highlighting that, because I think it breeds that culture of we don't know everything and there's no way we're not going to keep up. The kids are going to be always ahead of us, so we need to help them be part of it too and bring them into the leadership team too. Because again, the transferable skills, what better way to have kids demonstrate their learning? I mean, that's a higher goal. It doesn't really matter what they're doing. Are they teaching us and are they learning and giving opportunities to share? That's wonderful stuff.
It's also a great way to sell parents if their kids are excited about it. If their kids are excited about anything in school, the parents are going to raise their eyebrows and say, wow, this must be something that's worthwhile. So getting kids on board has a trickle-down effect for that as well.
Yeah, I think that's a powerful tactic to really kind of advocate to get parents to kind of be on board financially in a lot of ways, because we're asking them whether it be you need to buy this device or you need to support this bond. Yeah, we could say it all the time. You know, we're just a talking head in some ways, saying, yeah, we want you to do that. But when we had our students come to our school board and actually, you know, take their 38-pound backpack and dump out all the books and then say, here's the 2 pounds I now have because I have this one device, totally unplanned. I didn't know they were going to do it. It really floored everybody. And I actually was going to present afterwards, and I said, you know what, that's it. That was a drop the mic moment. The kids, you know, they're really the ones that are kind of championing for it. And if they're not on board with it, then there's other problems. I've seen districts where kids have kind of opposed it because they've mastered the art of school, so they don't want to really change the way they've kind of done things. So I think that's an important kind of component. We talk about parents, teachers, and administrators, but of course it always comes back to the kids. So I think that's a good kind of a tip there for getting parents more involved and being advocates for the technology in their schools.
You know,
wrap up points, anybody, real quick? We're kind of getting close to the end. Scott, you want to go ahead and then do a wrap up?
I think one of the most important pieces to outreach with parents is to make sure your district is controlling the message and not outside media. You know, are you communicating with them? How are you doing that using different tools and messages? Because if you leave it up to the newspapers, they're going to focus on the financial side of it and then any negative story that comes from it. You have to share how this is enhancing, or I'm sorry, accelerating learning, and how you're augmenting, modifying, and redefining that learning experience. You have to share your message.
Yeah, same. Good point, Scott. One of the big things we did at the end of the year was we showed school committee all the things that had happened based on the fact that we were one-to-one schools, all the connections we had made with app developers, our kids had viral videos that they made of PSA announcements retweeted by Rachel Maddow. Our kids presented at the Ed Camp Boston at the Microsoft Center in Cambridge. And so we just showed all the things that had happened to our kids, all the authentic experiences, and there were probably a dozen of them that would not have happened if we had not created this environment. Things that I don't think are happening in a lot of communities. So it's really important to talk about that stuff all the time and to put your kids front and center, as we already mentioned. And I don't think you can go wrong if that's what you're focusing on.
Nat, you have a wrap-up point?
No, I think that, you know, again, communication is important, transparency. I think, you know, it's a cliche, but it's that, you know, this is hard work, but I really do believe this is the right work to be doing. And that I mean, we have to stick with it. And, you know, the collaboration, it's been a joy to see our teachers be so excited to collaborate and to have them share that with the parents, and the parents just, boy, I mean, that's what I want my kids' teachers to be talking about. And again, that resonates, to see that excitement because they're tapping in and they're making it accessible. The devices have also allowed us kids, when they've been sick at home, to tap into work through Google Docs during the school day. That sold 3 of our parents right away. Just seeing that example in front of them, wow. And then encourage them to share too. So it's wonderful.
I think you hit a really good point there at the end about especially being hard work. And I think we can all agree that, you know, the easier thing for administrators, the easier thing for parents, and the easier thing for teachers would be to stay in the old model of let's just have 3 computers in the back of the classroom. You know, that benefits all of us in terms of like we don't have to do the work. but we forgot that one group in that discussion, and it doesn't benefit kids. And so I think in all the things we've talked about today and tonight, really having that connection with parents and talking about the benefits of that. One last thing I'll share, and then I'll do the wrap up, is that a lot of companies are now hiring what's called a corporate reporter. It's not a PR position, but it's actually an internal position that actually tells the story of your district. And I think all of you hit on this at some point in the last hour about how you need to share your story and have that conversation and tell the story with the parents. And I think that's a big part of getting everyone on board. So if you don't have that person in your district, that's a champion for you, whether it be on Twitter or someone that's writing a blog, it's amazing to hear the voices of the kids and the teachers to support that. So I do want to thank everyone. Thank you, Nat. Thank you, Scott. Thank you, Patrick, for joining us, and all the folks watching us on the live stream. I'll tell you that by tomorrow we should have a full recording of this webinar and other curated content up on the www.connectedlearning.tv site that you can share with your networks. This actually wraps up our third webinar of the month, and we encourage everyone to keep watching this conversation and keep it going via Twitter. We use a couple of hashtags. The one that we've been using tonight, hashtag ETTMobile, and also hashtag Connected Learning. We'll kind of continue on that conversation on Twitter for those of you that will join us, and by getting involved in the Connected Learning Google Plus community. So we hope you'll join us next Wednesday, August 28th, from 4 to 5 p.m. Pacific time. That's 7 to 8 Eastern time, here on the live stream again, to get inspired by some really innovative teachers who are using mobile and tablet devices to reinvent their classrooms. I can't wait to see that. So check us out on www.connectedlearning.tv for more information. Thanks again, everyone, and have a great night.